Is 2004's Catwoman having a bit of a resurgence lately? Yes? No? Maybe so? I don't know. But I am seeing more and more people online voice their admiration for this film, calling it an amazingly unappreciated camp classic, or just praising Halle Berry in general because she's Halle Berry. Even this past Halloween, Sweetie dressed up as Halle Berry's version of Catwoman. Halle Berry was in a TikTok video too, and it was really cute.
What the hell is going on here? I'm just trying to get out here and get these. I know that's right. We're never ever wrong.
Catwoman has gained the reputation of being one of the worst superhero movies of the 2000s. Some even say of all time, and those people are over-exaggerating. I mean, come on now. There was a lot worse. But Supergirl, Elektra, and Catwoman were used as examples on why superhero movies with women as the leads just don't work. 3 not very great movies, one of them from decades ago, was enough for people to say, no more women-led superhero movies. There was a dozen of male-led superhero movies that were absolute shit, but no one was saying no more male leads because they just can't cut it. Anyways, putting that all aside, when I was a youngster, during the wild 2000s era of experimental CGI testing ground that was the superhero movies back then, I was looking forward to Catwoman. I used to watch the 60s Batman TV show where Catwoman was played by Eartha Kitt, and I was a big fan of Halle Berry, so it made sense that she would be Catwoman. I never got to see Catwoman in the cinema when it came out for reasons that I can't remember, but we did get it on DVD and we bought the tie-in PS2 game. I remember really liking Catwoman. I watched it a bunch of times, but then we borrowed it to a friend and they lost it, so it's been a very long time since I sat down to watch Catwoman. But in 2021, that changed.
So scandalous.
Patience Phillips is a mild-mannered, insecure, and timid young artist that works as a graphic designer at the cosmetic company Halle. While working late on a project, she overhears that the company's face cream, Beuline, is causing disfigurements to those who use it. And despite it being poison in a jar, the company's heads are still adamant about it being sold to the public. Patience is caught listening and tries to desperately escape the armed guards in pursuit of her. Patience tries to escape through the pipes, but the guards are given the kill order and flush the pipes, where she drowns. A glaring of cats gather around her body, and their leader, a cat named Midnight, who had appeared to Patience earlier, resurrects her and bestows her with enhanced feline superpowers. Patience, now as Catwoman, embarks on a quest for revenge. Honestly, I think my summary was a lot better than other people's. Catwoman was in development hell for a long-ass time, since the early 90s, and was originally intended to be a spin-off with Michelle Pfeiffer reprising her role as Selina Kyle. And the movie would be geared towards an older audience since Batman Returns was really pushing it with that PG-13 rating. It didn't work out since Batman and Batman-related content was now focused on being family-friendly. Catwoman stayed in development hell for over a decade until it was rushed into production to make up for the cancelled 2003 Batman vs Superman movie. Knowing more about how this movie came to be definitely explains a lot. So let's point out the obvious first. Patience Phillips is not Selina Kyle, and that's fine. There have been so many versions of Selina Kyle as Catwoman across all media over the decades, and Selina Kyle isn't the only Catwoman. There have been other characters to take up that title. I get why some people were upset that she wasn't named Selina Kyle, but I understand why she wasn't. I think the intention was to remove any expectations that fans may have had for the character and which backstory from which comic run would they choose to adapt, and to avoid questions if Batman would be there or is Batgirl gonna show up. Is that actor playing that popular Gotham villain? They wanted the freedom to do their own thing and not be beholden to the legacy of the comics and the odd continuity that was the Tim Burton/Joel Schumacher Batman series. Besides, there was a decade gap between them anyways. I didn't want to be too influenced by the comic book, because the whole point of a movie is to be first a movie, and to be different. This movie has its own identity. It does have its own thing going on, but to act as if Catwoman 2004 didn't glance at Batman Returns' origin story of Catwoman would be a little bit disingenuous. Both characters start off as meek and insecure women who were killed by their bosses and while on the brink of death are surrounded by cats who grant them a new life and a new attitude and an alter ego. Then they both go on a revenge quest. I'm just saying. The director, Pitof, just the one name, this was the second movie he directed. Prior to becoming a director, Pitof had a long career as a visual effects supervisor. Catwoman was the second film he directed and his first big-budget Hollywood project. The 2000s was an experimental time for newer CGI, and superhero movies were the testing ground. As a VFX supervisor, I think Pitof wanted to show off a little bit. That's why I can forgive the CGI in Midnight and Catwoman leaping off buildings and looking like an early PS3 game. Plus, the Cat Vision POV shots were quite fitting. Every moment strives to be visually interesting, which is a double-edged sword because I do like the cinematography. Thierry Arbogast was the DOP, and he had worked on films like The Fifth Element. All this soft lighting and warm tones, everyone looks so airbrushed, almost like this movie was filmed with an Instagram beauty filter. The transitions between scenes and establishing shots are very stylized. Oh, and the scene where Patience is called to meet with the Hadirs are framed like a comic book panel, if that makes sense. Now, on the downside of showing off, there were times where I wanted the camera to remain stationary. Pitof loves a camera rotation. I would have liked it for the editing to slow down too, just for the action scenes, so I could follow the fight better. And the thing is, it did, sometimes, but other times, no.
I want to thank the writers, all 20 of them.
As for the script, since it was in development for a long time then suddenly rushed into production, the final screenplay ended up having 4 credited writers. So this is a case of having too many cooks in the kitchen, but there are still some good side dishes here. What I really liked about this movie that helped set it apart from what came before it was the more mystical, supernatural structure to Catwoman and her powers, instead of being an ordinary person that has trained their body to its peak condition. This is a personal preference. I like for superheroes to have some type of fantastical or science fiction basis to them, instead of being really good at CrossFit or something. The mythology that they incorporated to build up the lore was quite intriguing. The perfectly cast Frances Conroy as mysterious cat lady Ophelia Powers helps explain to Patience that there have always been Catwomen throughout history, dating all the way back to ancient Egypt and the goddess Bast. Bast messengers, the Egyptian Mao, have bestowed this feline spirit to women throughout the ages. Midnight chose Patience and resurrected her to be the latest Catwoman. That's really creative. Now, a lot of people did not like the evil cosmetic company pushing their deadly beauty cream to the world plot. Despite how relevant it may be today in a post-Jaclyn Hill Cosmetics world, it does come off as a bit low stakes compared to villains of superhero movies at the time. My take is that one of the many male writers here had no clue how to construct a complex female villain outside of stereotypically female-related issues like beauty. In an interview, Halle Berry had this to say: "I remember having that argument. Why can't Catwoman save the world like Batman and Superman do? Why is she just saving women from a face cream that cracks their face off? I mean, when you break it down, an evil beauty brand does sound like it could be the antagonist in a random episode of Totally Spies, or a Monster of the Week filler episode in a Magical Girl anime. Oi, the fact that I found 2 Totally Spies episodes, 1 episode of Powerpuff Girls, and 1 episode of Sailor Moon with a similar plot did not surprise me in the slightest. And what's funny is that all those episodes had an easily dispatched random villain of the week. None of them were a major antagonist for a movie or the season's finale's major evil threat. And these are all kids' shows. I think that says a lot. I haven't read any Catwoman comics and I can't think of any enemies that Catwoman has that would have inspired a stronger antagonist. But if I were to imagine Laurel Hadir's motive, it would be something like this. Since Laurel wanted to hold on to her youth and beauty, she could have gotten a hold of an Egyptian jewel that grants the wearer eternal youth and beauty and power by stealing the life force from people, leaving them dead or close to death. But she only has half of the jewels, so Laurel becomes hell-bent on finding the other half. And since Catwoman has this whole origins of being a jewel thief, it's up to her to track down this Egyptian jewel before Laurel does. I don't know, I haven't thought about it that much, but it does raise the stakes a little bit higher, and it ties into Catwoman's Egyptian origins that the movie laid out. The performances in this movie have gotten a lot of flack. Overacting and weird were brought up a lot in reviews. Film critic Bill Muller even said that Halle Berry should give back her Oscar as penance for Catwoman and Gothica.
If you don't get that bullshit out of my face, bitch.
I saw some reviews calling out the inexperience of the director to direct a talented cast. And yes, that is certainly a factor. Because good acting can elevate bad writing, and I would argue that this is certainly the case here. You can tell that Halle Berry and Sharon Stone both clocked early on that the script was weak and the plot was kind of silly, but had some hidden gems. Their performances definitely have a blend of being very earnest and a tongue-in-cheek self-awareness, which is what helps make something camp and fun.
A girl like me lands on her feet.
The way Halle Berry delivers those one-liners and cat puns are very intentional. Halle Berry and Sharon Stone were both on the same wavelength. Just look at this deleted scene.
Look, if you've got a problem with him, maybe you and I can work it out. Gal to gal.
Ooh, that would be fun. We could do each other's hair, talk about boys.
This really should have stayed in. I knew I felt some sexual tension between these two. Sharon Stone as Laurel Harder would have made an interesting villain in another movie. She was a model and the face of her husband's cosmetics company. They are stuck in a loveless marriage because it's good for business. You get that Laurel was fine with that setup, but in a society that is obsessed with youth, she finds herself being pushed aside and replaced. So she decides to gaslight, gatekeep, and girl boss her way to the top, and I love that for her.
I was everything they wanted me to be. I was never more beautiful, never more powerful. And then I turned 40, and they threw me away.
Benjamin Bratt as the persistive detective Tom Lone. He was good. The romance subplot was weak and relied heavily on Benjamin Bratt and Halle Berry's natural chemistry. What other nice things can I say about Detective Tom before I drag him? It was nice to see an interracial couple where both involved were people of color and, an indigenous man at that. You don't see that too often. All right, that's the best that I can do. I was happy that Patience didn't end up with him because he was a piece of shit. Do you know why? He found her diamond razor claw and brought it in as evidence that led to her arrest. Call your lawyer, Patience, because that man performed an illegal search of your property without a warrant. Who's to say he didn't plant the evidence there himself? And another thing, you left right after sex to submit that so-called evidence. You didn't even wait till the next day. You crusty, dusty bitch. Fuck him, all cops are blood clots. Nah, bun that guy, he's dead. Berry's physical acting is worth praising. Patience, before the transformation, is very awkward and fidgets a lot, tries to make herself blend into the background, and avoids eye contact. After the change, you see how she walks more with confidence. She can look her love interest in the eye and flirt with him, and she can tell off her boss. Halle as Catwoman, you can tell that she may have drawn some inspiration from the legendary Eartha Kitt.
You boys thought you could come in here and steal all these beautiful things? What a perfect idea.
But she worked hard to bring to life her own version of Catwoman that was as fun and playful as she was sexy. She got all those cat movements down and incorporated all those cat-like dance movements into capoeira. She did most of her stunts too. Full-on learned capoeira and became Christy Monteiro.
I studied capoeira. It's a Brazilian form of martial arts.
Basically, the guys would go in and do the broad strokes of the actual fight, and while we were doing that, I would throw in some cat movements, like this is what she might do here.
Halle did an unbelievable amount of physical training for this role. From the beginning, she wanted to do as much of it herself as she could. She didn't have the attitude of, well, just pop in there after the doubles, do all the hard stuff. A lot of what you see in the movie is Halle Berry.
Throughout the movie, Patience struggles to come to terms with who she is now and find the balance of Patience Phillips and Catwoman. That teeny tiny sliver of a character arc is all Halle Berry. She did the best that she could do with the little she was given because Patience is severely underwritten. So any good points about the character is all Halle Berry's doing as far as I'm concerned. Before becoming Catwoman, Patience is very much an empty slate with not much backstory, probably so she can be the audience surrogate of wish fulfillment. Yeah, she's a shy young artist, but like, is that it? In the opening monologue, Patience says this:
If there had been an obituary, it would have described the unremarkable life of an unremarkable woman. Survived by no one.
Survived by no one. She doesn't have a family. Was she an orphan in foster care? Is her sassy best friend, played by Lois Griffin's voice actress, the only person in her life? There are no pictures of her family. There's not even any small talk about her background or childhood. Part of me can't help but think the reason why they never hinted at her family is so that they can avoid having more than one black person in the movie. I'm just saying. Patience tells us that she's an artist but had to get a grown-up job as a graphic designer, even though that's not what she wanted because it pays the bills, and yes, very relatable content. However, we never learn about what she actually wants to do, or what kind of artist Patience even is. We get a blink and you miss it moment where we see a page from her sketchpad, and Detective Tom compliments her work by comparing it to Marc Chagall, an old Dutch master artist. Yet we never see her creating art that she's passionate about. Does she want to do portraits? Because the one that she did of George Hader as a devil looked pretty good. Or are landscapes more of her thing? Is she into expressionism, surrealism, cubism? You know what would have been interesting and help flesh out Patience's transformation? If we saw some of her artwork before and after becoming Catwoman, it would have been a nice juxtaposition with the sci-fi forensic handwriting analysis scene, or replace it altogether. The only other time you see Patience creating art is in an alternate ending where she's painting a mural of a Black Panther. Patience is fired from her job, and we never hear her talk about how this is a chance for her to chase what she's passionate about and have her work be in some prestigious art gallery or create graphic novels. I don't know what she wants, and that is the problem. Patience Phillips' character arc was the secondary focus of this movie. The primary focus was, look at how bloody sexy Halle Berry is. Just look at her stunning face and that banging body. She could pounce on me any day. You don't have to tell me how fine Halle Berry is. We all know that she's fine. Superhero movies are a power fantasy, and the problem is that many people have no clue what a female power fantasy is and even looks like. It can be tricky to identify the components because we aren't accustomed to seeing them used time and time again, like how we are with male power fantasies, from the more tame and standard types to the over-the-top, purely indulgent types. I have my own examples of what makes up a female power fantasy that some people might disagree with, which is absolutely fine. We are all trying to figure it out. From the moment she was introduced in the comics, Catwoman has been a very sexy, femme fatale character with a not so subtle BDSM edge. While Wonder Woman was able to fly somewhat under the radar with its kinky origins, Catwoman had no chance. Not with that whip. The Catwoman movie easily falls into what Professor of Critical Theory and Social Justice Dr. Caroline Heldman calls the fighting toy. The FFT appears empowered, but her existence serves the pleasure of the heterosexual male viewer. In short, the FFT takes female agency, weds it to normalize male violence, and appropriates it for the male gaze. Hollywood rolls out FFTs every few years that generally don't perform well at the box office, leading executives to wrongly conclude that female action leads aren't bankable. The problem isn't their sex. The problem is their portrayal as sex objects, and objects aren't convincing protagonists. Catwoman won the Razzie for Worst Movie of 2005, and Halle Berry won the award for Worst Actress, which was undeserved. She showed up to the ceremony to pick up her award in person with her Oscar, and she cracked some jokes and threw some shade at the critic who said that she should give it back.
No, I don't have to give this back. It's got my name on it!
Berry's Razzie acceptance speech is one that gets talked about a lot because she actually showed up. Her speech was really funny and she was such a good sport about the whole thing. And it made me just want her to be in more comedic roles. I really loved this one line.
Because when I was a kid, my mother told me that if you could not be a good loser, then there's no way you could be a good winner. If you weren't able to take criticism, then you were not worthy of getting praise.
For a long time, the failure of Catwoman had people asking, did Halle Berry become the latest victim of the fabled Oscar curse? What is the Oscar curse? The Oscar curse is a superstition that after an actor wins an Academy Award, they go through hardships in their personal and professional life. In many listicles about actors afflicted by this so-called curse, most of them are women, and Halle Berry's name gets brought up a lot as a standout example. The paragraph on her usually contains some variation of, how could she go from winning an Oscar for Monsters Ball to winning a Razzie for Catwoman and then starring in a bunch of mediocre movies afterwards? Yes, how indeed. These listicles treat it like some huge mystery when it really isn't. It's quite simple to understand, but to get the full scope of everything, we need to take a look back at the first black woman to be nominated for the Academy Award for the Best Actress category, Dorothy Dandridge. I've heard some people call Dorothy Dandridge the Halle Berry of her day, and I can understand why. They share some similarities. Both of them were born in Cleveland, Ohio. They were both black sex symbols, and they both made huge historical strides in the entertainment industry. Oh, and if you didn't know, Halle Berry produced and starred in the HBO TV biopic introducing Dorothy Dandridge. She won a bunch of awards too, and this has to be one of my favorite performances by Berry. If this is your first time hearing about Dorothy Dandridge, let me give you a brief summary. She was an actress, singer, and dancer active from the 1930s to the 1960s. She's best known for starring in the film that got her the Oscar nomination for Best Actress, Carmen Jones. The success of Carmen Jones was a big deal. It made bank, and this was an all-black cast too. Dandridge, as the titular Carmen Jones, gave a standout career-defining performance. She was suddenly a black sex symbol of the 50s and was on the cusp of international stardom. She signed a deal with 20th Century Fox and seemed bound to be the black leading lady of the silver screen. However, Dandridge was discouraged from taking minor roles from the director of Carmen Jones, Otto Preminger, who was having an affair with her at the time. How he saw things was that Dorothy Dandridge was this Oscar-nominated actress. Her white counterparts that had been nominated were being offered prestigious leading roles, not the side character roles. Now, there were plans for Dandridge to star in more black remakes of films made in the 30s, but those plans never came into fruition, and after Carmen Jones, Dandridge took a 3-year hiatus from movies. Her big comeback was in the film Island in the Sun, where she had third billing but played a mostly supporting character. It wasn't until 1959 that Dorothy got to play a leading lady in a major Hollywood movie that had a wide release, Porgy and Bess, that was also directed by Otto Preminger. Dorothy Dandridge said that she regretted taking Preminger's advice as it stalled her career. See, what Otto Preminger failed to realize is that for a black actress, an Oscar nomination didn't mean a goddamn thing in the 50s. An Oscar win didn't mean much either. When Hattie McDaniel won the Best Supporting Actress in 1939, she still played maid and mammy roles right until the end of her career. While Dorothy Dandridge may have been seen as the top choice for a black actress, she wasn't the top choice for an actress in general. The studios would always default to a white actress, even if the role called for a black actress, or any actress of color for that matter. Movies that were about or just featured a main character who was a very light-skinned or mixed woman passing as white, which there were many back in the day, you would think that those roles would be offered to Dorothy Dandridge or Lena Horne. But with the Hays Code saying no miscegenation on screen, white actresses were the first choice.
And let me tell you something. The only thing that separates women of color from anyone else is opportunity. You cannot win an Emmy for roles that are simply not there.
Many black actresses have talked about how when it came to casting, they were told something along the lines of, "You'll be the first one we call if we decide to go black with the role." Every decade has their go-to black actress. I'm sure you can notice a pattern here. They all fit a certain look. But like I said, being the first black choice doesn't mean you're the first choice. The casting still defaults to white unless they can be convinced to go black with the role. While Catwoman was in development hell, the actresses considered for the role were Ashley Judd and Nicole Kidman. I remember in the 2012 Oscar Roundtable interview, Viola Davis was asked how the movie The Help was her first leading role in a movie despite being Viola Davis. She was interrupted a lot, and the conversation was diverted far away from the original question and answer. It's actually really aggravating to watch. So let's just focus on what she said before she was rudely interrupted.
How is it possible that The Help is your first leading role? I mean, really, you just got an Oscar nomination for Doubt. You have so many Tonys. How is it possible that that was your first leading role in a movie?
Well, it's just the politics, it's just the politics of it all.
Of Hollywood.
It's, well, yeah, I mean.
There aren't that many roles for
There just aren't a lot of roles for, I'm a 46-year-old black woman who really doesn't look like Halle Berry, and Halle Berry's having a hard time. There's not a lot of leading roles.
Okay, yeah. If an Oscar-winning black actress that fits into the preferred look was having a hard time finding quality roles, I'm sure you can imagine what all the darker-skinned black actresses were dealing with. I can still remember how shocked people were when they realized that Us was the second movie where Lupita Nyong'o was the lead since winning her Oscar for 12 Years a Slave. How can that be? That doesn't sound right. When asked in a 2013 interview about whether there had been huge changes in the film industry, Alfre Woodard had this to say.
You know when we'll know if things have changed? You know that brilliant and stunningly beautiful and poised Lupita Nyong'o? 12 Years a Slave is, besides the myriad of things that it is, what an incredible launch of a career. And this is her first thing. We will see if, like another brilliant young woman, we saw Jennifer Lawrence, see the trajectory of her path, what she's offered after that. I'm saying Jennifer because that's one we can think of most. Then we'll know whether things have changed, or if Lupita is consigned to playing second banana ensemble person for the next 10 years.
Ideally, an Oscar is supposed to help raise an actor's profile. It's supposed to be an advancement of one's career. The title of an Academy Award winner comes with a level of prestige and bankability and a way to open doors. Ideally. It was surprising because I thought they were going to just back up the truck and drop them off at my house, right? When you have a historic win like that, you think, oh, this is going to fundamentally change. It did fundamentally change me, but it didn't change my place in the business overnight. I still had to go back to work. I still had to try to fight to make a way out of no way. Let's go back and look at some of the films Halle Berry was in before Monsters Ball and the award, and look at the films that she was in prior to Catwoman. For most of the 90s, Halle Berry was still black famous. Many of her starring roles early in her career were movies where the cast were majority black, Boomerangs, Baps, and so on. The late 90s and early 2000s where Halle Berry was getting more mainstream, aka white, attention. The year 2000 is when she won an Emmy for introducing Dorothy Dandridge, and she played Storm in X-Men. Then starred in the movie Swordfish the following year. So 2 action movies. In Swordfish, she was the love interest. I only watched it once and can't remember too much about it. But I do remember the buzz surrounding the movie being, oh my goodness, Halle Berry is going to be topless in this movie. This is her first topless scene. Do you know how much she was paid for this scene? As for the first X-Men movie, can anyone even think of any memorable Storm moments? Outside of that one line, getting rid of Toad, that didn't make too much sense due to script changes. You can't remember anything Storm did in that first movie. A recent Emmy-winning actress playing an iconic character was in the background throughout the whole movie. After Monsters Ball and the Oscar win, Halle Berry was in 3 other movies, Die Another Day, X-Men 2, and Gothica. Die Another Day was a Bond movie, and she was the latest Bond girl, Jinx. She had a major part, of course, but her character was not the central focus. In an interview with Variety, Halle Berry revealed a spin-off movie about Jinx was in early development but was thrown out. It was ahead of its time. Nobody was ready to sink that kind of money into a black female action star. They just weren't sure of its value. That's where we were then. In X-Men 2, looking at all the promotional posters, You would think that Storm would have a bigger role compared to the previous movie, and she did. Storm gave Nightcrawler some kind words, and she got to pilot the X-Jet and clear some skies. And that was it. The sad part was that Halle really was invested in Storm. I don't know if she was a Storm fan before being cast or if she did her research afterwards, but hearing her talk about Storm in interviews, you can tell she's really knowledgeable about Storm's backstory in the comics and her significance, and was really excited about portraying that character. I know there's some issues with colorism here, but we do not have time to get into that in this video. After starring in a bunch of action movies and not being able to take part in most of the action, then there's the way she was sexualized in the press as promotion for the movies Swordfish and Monsters Ball. My goodness, the way Make Me Feel Good had a hold on people back then. And to top it off, a spin-off movie with her character Jinx from Die Another Day was rejected. Yeah, no doubt Catwoman must have sounded very appealing to Halle Berry. A chance to play a popular anti-hero in a movie where she is the main titular character, not one of the many revolving love interests of a franchise. This isn't an ensemble cast where she'll be pushed into the background either, so she was gonna get paid. It was also a chance to diversify superhero movies. Yes, she was still going to be extremely sexy and sexed up, as is the nature of the character, but in comparison to her previous roles, Halle Berry would be kicking a lot more ass. No doubt seeing how Halle could be an action star, doing all the big stunt work, be suspended from wires, and do fight choreography meant that the director and writers of the third X-Men movie could no longer justify Halle/Storm not having a greater presence. You have an Oscar-winning actress that is comfortable with being flipped around on wires, and she is playing an extremely iconic and popular character, and you're not gonna give her shit to do? What's wrong with you? Seeing Halle Berry in John Wick 3 made so much sense. Like, can we get her in a movie similar to The Old Guard? And you know what? It didn't surprise me at all that Halle's directorial debut, Bruised, was about female mixed martial arts.
Also, as the actor, you know, you don't really have the ability to be in control in a real way. Say you're an actor and I can only come to the set or to the situation and do what I can do. But without being the producer or the director, I have no control over how that film is put together or how it turns out, right? And so many times I have, I think, carried the burden of failures that were not really mine because I were powerless to the process, right? I can think of one movie like Catwoman, which I loved doing. I worked really hard becoming a cat, you know, I learned capoeira, like I thought my job as learning to be a cat, and as an actor, that was my job. But I wasn't in control of the script, I didn't direct it, nor did I produce it. But its alleged failure sort of fell squarely on my shoulders, as if I was in control of all of it, which I wasn't.
Halle Berry bore a lot of the blame for Catwoman, which is unfair because most of the movie's good points are because of her. You rarely hear people talk about the director Pitoff because, well, his directing credits are small, and you certainly don't hear people mocking the 4 writers. That's why in this video essay, I felt the need to point them out and actually name them, and also to highlight Halle Berry's performance. Even with all the hate it's gotten, Halle Berry still likes Catwoman and is proud about what she did, as she should be. And decades later, many people have expressed a fondness for it, appreciating the movie for what it was and being a perfect snapshot of superhero movies of that era. After watching Catwoman for the first time in years, I see a lot of potential that was there. In the hands of another director and a new rewrite, this really could have been the camp masterpiece that many claim it to be. Halle Berry has expressed interest in wanting to direct a Catwoman remake, and I for one would like to see it. I really enjoyed Bruised, and I'm curious to see how she would reimagine the character, be it Patience Phillips or Selena Kyle. So is Catwoman 2004 worth watching? Yeah, why not? The way this video took forever to come out, oh my goodness, I was not expecting it to be the first video I upload in the new year, but such is life. I was so sick. I was really sick. I was actually scared for a moment. I couldn't speak at all. It was really bad, but I'm better now. Thank you to everyone for subscribing to me, whether it was 4 years ago or 4 hours ago. And a big thank you to all my patrons, Cheyenne Lynn, Hariana Hook, Mariah, Kemi, M. Zaid. Thank you all for being so patient as well. Anyways, I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.